Situated just over a mile outside the town of Forfar in the county of Angus in Scotland lie the ancient ruins of Restenneth Priory, a 12th century Augustinian abbey which once enjoyed royal favour and is where Robert the Bruce laid his infant son John to rest in the early 1300s. But is this ancient ruin medieval or Pictish? The earliest datable masonry at the bottom of Restenneth's tower is from the 1100s and the reign of Alexander I. He reigned from 1101 to 1124 and is said to have transferred the annals of Iona to the church here. The tower displays evidence of 3 periods of construction. The first 3 metres is the oldest part of the church and was likely built as a tower porch in about 1100. It is similar in style to the tower porch at Dunfermline Abbey that was built by Malcolm III and Queen Margaret. The tower was evidently heightened later in the 1100s, and its octagonal spire with splayed feet was probably added in the 1400s. The rest of the site appears to date from the 1200s. It was in the 1100s that Restenneth was first referred to in writing. King David I, who reigned from the 1120s to the 1150s, granted a number of royal estates to Restenneth, ensuring it had the income it needed to prosper. At this time, the church probably only comprised a chancel and a tower. King Malcolm IV granted Restenneth to Jedburgh Abbey in 1162, thus placing it under the control of the Augustinian monks there. Around this time a nave was added and the now Priory Church also became the parish church for the nearby town of Forfar. As an Augustinian priory which was governed from Jedburgh, Restenneth became a wealthy establishment. King Malcolm IV added land to its ownership from across Angus and more widely too. The priory was significantly expanded in the early 1200s. A new nave and choir were added, the tower house was retained, and a new range of stone buildings provided accommodation for the canons who lived and worshipped here, replacing their previous wooden dwellings. The rebuilt chancel was consecrated in 1243 by David de Burnham, the Bishop of St Andrews. During the Wars of Independence in the late 1200s and the early 1300s, Restenneth Priory was seriously damaged by fire. Robert the Bruce had destroyed Forfar Castle during the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, preventing its use by the English. It is widely thought that he may also have had a hand in the destruction of Restenneth too. However, he provided generously for the rebuilding of a much grander priory, adding the spire on the top of the tower and a full cloister. Robert the Bruce's son John died shortly after birth in 1327 and was buried here at Restenneth. He was the twin of David II, who continued to support the priory during his reign. When the abbey was built, it stood on the banks of a small loch, which provided a good supply of fish and fresh water for the canons who lived here. Augustinian canons wore distinctive black gowns and not only lived and worshipped in the abbey, but went out and worshipped in the community too. They spent most of their time in a perpetual and intense ritual of prayer and work throughout the day and night. The cloister gardens would have been a place of paradise, scents of rose, thyme and lavender drifting in the air. It was built on the south side of the church to benefit from as much natural sunlight as possible. Designed to be a tranquil place where the canons could read, garden and play. Many restorative herbs and plants would have been grown here, as well as vegetables. A covered walkway gave protected access to the domestic buildings and the chapter house. During the 1400s, the priory steadily declined. The last prior was appointed in the 1490s, and by the beginning of the 1500s there were only 2 canons in residence. After the Reformation, Restenneth and all its landholdings were granted to the home family. The church continued to serve as the parish church of Forfar until 1591, after which it passed through several owners. It was damaged by troops who set up camp here during the 1745 uprising, and it spent much of the 1800s as accommodation for livestock. It was transferred into state care in 1919 and is now looked after by Historic Environment Scotland. So the ruins we see here today are indeed medieval, dating back to the 12th century, but some people think the site predates then. This area of Scotland was the very heart of the ancient kingdom of the Picts. In fact, this area has been identified as Augustinian and is where King Nexton built a church in around 710 AD. Nexton had written to Colfrith, the abbot of Monkwearmouth in County Durham, asking for instruction in the Roman faith. He also sought assistance to build a stone church which he would dedicate to the most blessed of the apostles, St. Peter. This resulted in St. Boniface embarking on his mission to found the earliest churches in these Pictish lands. Could this site in fact be that of Colfrith's Church of Augustinian? The Pictish era generally refers to the period from AD 300 to 900. So, if King Nexton built a church here in AD 710, it might indeed be classified as Pictish. However, the Pictish period and the Middle Ages or the early medieval period overlap considerably. The medieval period is generally considered to be from the 5th to the 15th century AD. So, given that the earliest datable visible stone on site is from the 1100s, the conundrum of whether or not this medieval abbey was built on top of an existing Pictish site is a question only archaeology will be able to answer. But wouldn't it be great if it was?